Well, good morning, everyone. Pastor Corey Rowland here with Yorksville First, Midvale, and Newport Global Methodist Church, bringing a devotional today out of the book of Psalm and Psalm 71, verse 12. O God, be not far from me. O my God, make haste for my help. So here we have a plea to God, and one of the first things the psalmist addresses is God's distance from him. God, be not far from me. Do not stand far away from me. You know, sometimes our problems have a way of making God feel distant. You know, maybe we think that the reason we're going through our struggles or our trials or our problems is because God is far from us. And sometimes we think we're being punished by God or that God's turned his face from us. But that's not always the case. Sometimes when we get distracted or sometimes when we're overwhelmed by our problems, we forget to look for God. And so therefore he seems like he's farther away. But as the psalmist says, oh my God, he calls him his God. He knows him intimately. Make haste for my help. And we can be sure that God does make haste for our help. We can be sure that God stands ready to help us. We can be sure that God will never leave us nor forsake us. David, in Psalm 23, the beautiful Psalm 23, David records that though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, that there's no need to fear evil. Why? For he says, thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Now this is really quite profound for David to say the valley of the shadow of death. The other translations say the deepest, darkest valley. And in references to a shepherd, when you would go through those deep, dark valleys with sheep, oftentimes in the shadows would hide the wolves and the lions and the bears to eat the sheep. They would lurk there in the shadows. Predators would be there in the shadows. And that is very true of our own spiritual situation. There are times where we go through dark moments, or there's times where we go through hardships. That lurking in the shadow is that the enemy waiting for us, the enemy waiting to catch us in a trap. But David records that even in this deepest, darkest valley, think about the moment where you're most vulnerable. The moment where it's easiest for the enemy to attack you, the moment where you're the least prepared. David says, even in those moments, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. And so, yes, maybe sometimes, as the psalm says, maybe we have to cry out to God and say, Lord, don't be far from me. But the application of Scripture reminds us that if we would draw close to God, he draws close to us. That God only stands as far away as we want him to be. That he stands ready to be there with us, ready to comfort us, ready to take care of us. And all we have to do is lean on him. All we have to do is ask. All we have to do is seek him, and he will take care of us. Now, the problem is, though, if we want to cultivate a relationship with God where he's there when we need him, then in the moments where things are going good, in the moments where maybe we don't have a pressing need, in the moments where you're not walking through the valley of shadow of death, don't stop praying to God. Don't stop seeking him. If you want to have a relationship with God to where he's sustaining you in the hard times, then in the good times, reach out to him. In the good times, don't be far from him. So often in our world today, we don't notice God's absence in our life until we really need him. And then we realize, oh, I've not been in church. Oh, I've not been praying. Oh, I don't really do anything for God. And then we say, Lord, help me. Lord, help me. Lord, help me. I cannot tell you how many times I've had people come to me and ask for prayer when they're going through a bad situation, or they'll ask for help from the church. We try to help people, financially or different things. They'll call and ask for help from the church, and they'll call and say, please pray, I'm going through a rough time. And yes, as the church, we want to help through those situations. We want to be able to help them. But then when things aren't in such dire needs, when things get better, we don't ever hear from them again. We don't ever see them again. Or I can't tell you how many times that there's been situations where God is trying to get a hold of the person's heart. And yes, they're going through rough times. They're going through bad times. And they're calling upon God because they need him. But then when things start to straighten out, when things start to get easier, they forget God. If we want to have a relationship with God where he is there with us through the bad times, then we better be with him through the good times. Oftentimes when God feels distant, it's because we've been neglecting God, but we only notice that in our problems and in our trials and in our tribulations. So yes, God stands ready to help. Yes, God is there for you. Yes, you can lean on him and you can come to him and he will not turn you away. But if you want God to be your God, that's not just in the bad times. That's not just in the stormy times. That's in the times where things are easy. Each and every day, creating an atmosphere in your life where each and every day you are seeking God, you are desiring God. And trust me, you don't just need his help in the bad times. You need his help Even in the little things, even in the things that don't seem important, even in the everyday mundane, seek the Lord. Let him guide you. And I promise you, in the bad times, you won't have to say, God, why are you far from me? In the bad times, you can say, I shall feel no evil, Lord, for I know you are with me. Amen.